Hello, welcome to Topaasia study webinar. This time it's about dialogue, serious games, gamification, playfulness, and Topaasia. And we have Professor Tuomas Harviainen from University of Tampere. Welcome to the webinar. And today we have around 45 minutes, max 45 minutes talk, and then the rest of the time, 15 minutes, is dedicated to discussion and questions. You may put questions in the chat, and we try to facilitate and deliver those to Tuomas in the end of the webinar. So welcome, Tuomas. The stage is yours.
Thank you, Juha. So I decided to immediately change the title of my speech. I hope you don't mind. The dialogue issues is something that will be in between the lines and especially then hopefully in the discussions, because as far as I've understood, there are a lot of people here who are experienced with these kinds of tools as well as with serious play and so forth.
They do whatever they want, yes, so we cannot regulate.
Okay, that probably wasn't aimed at me.
No,
No.
You just continue. I muted.
Yes. So I'm talking about reflective, serious gaming. Each of these is a rather loaded word, but we'll get back especially to the reflection side. And serious gaming is a phrase that is very easy to use here, but it is actually quite loaded with a lot of things. We can, for instance, think about how simulation gaming and business gaming and such have existed for a quite long time, but the phrase serious gaming as opposed to apparently fun gaming arose only in the early 70s and was really adopted by then people studying recreational games in instrumental uses. I like normally to talk about instrumental gaming as opposed to recreational gaming. They are to some extent overlapping, but here, since I think, for instance, design games, which we will be talking about a lot here today, there is a kind of view on which umbrella concepts are on top of which other umbrella concepts. So this is sort of more fitting. But when I say serious, it's definitely not opposed to fun. You can be both at the same time, and you can have a very clearly instrumental use or operational use for a game or playful form of structuring dialogue and so forth without it's still taking away some of the recreational value. If there are questions in between this talk, feel free to send them. And if Juha sees that it's something that should be asked right away, for instance, a clarification, I'm happy to also answer those at that point. So very quickly, why you should maybe listen to me. I'm not always sure if people should listen to me, but I'm now Professor of Information Studies and Interactive Media in Tampere University in Finland. That's a combination of library and information science, including information practices, information systems, information creation, which is something that fascinates me the most and which we will be talking about today. And then the interactive media here is a reference, especially to games. So I've been studying the use of games for various purposes for a bit over 2 decades. I'm also a freelance service designer. I have a master's degree in addition to my doctorate on service design, and there also I've been mostly interested in the way we use games and play as tools for the design. I also do a lot of public sector work, so that's my main interest. And third point is I've been a long time editor of games and information journals, so my interests arise also from that, and it has provided me in the 15 years I've been doing it kind of a great viewpoint on what kind of research is being conducted. And maybe the most important point here is I was first an editor for a special issue on design gaming for a journal called Simulation and Gaming. And following that, then edited or co-edited the journal for 5 years. So have been able to really see these instrumental operational uses of games. And that may also color slightly my views on the games that I discuss. So, quick reminder, I think you are professionals here, so you probably know this stuff already. But when we are talking about groups of games such as design games, and I definitely count Topaasia included into this kind of design games group, even though I don't think Jussi and Ville really were planning to do a design game when they started with it, maybe a dialogue tool or something like this. But design games are a specific subgroup of instrumental gaming, so gaming used for a purpose other than just the play. And studies that have been conducted on them have found that they actually have very little in common. This is an argument that comes from Ludwig Wittgenstein and emphasizes a kind of family resemblance. So we know design games go together and have a relation, mostly because they are used together for the purposes of design. And here I use design very broadly, so it can be the design of a service, it can be organizational redesign, it can be, as in the case of Topaasia, guided design of productive dialogues. But your average design game doesn't really exist. They are very different from one another, and then we also include in this talk a lot of games that are usually used for other purposes. So I will show a couple of slides soon where I point out sort of how far from one another these kinds of games and instrumental gaming all in all can be. So many of these have very little to do with many others in the similar category, yet we recognize them as the same. And more than anything, the function of a game, whether it's used for organizational development, learning of organizational skills, learning to understand the problems existing in an organization, or the strengths and opportunities, or both, these are what define these the most. And then a point to which I will return at the end of the talk, gamification blurs this even further. So very quickly to clarify this point, if you're not aware of gamification theory, the difference between serious uses of games or simulation games and gamification is that a game is an enclosed system that has its own rules and its own logics and so forth. You can have effects from the play that blur the lines a bit and that flow to other activities, as in the case of organizational gaming. In gamification, we are using elements of games in non-game settings to make them more meaningful, usually, hopefully, for the purpose of making them more explicitly fun and so forth. And the classical tools used for gamification tend to be things like points, badges, and leaderboards, which is a phrase basically used as an insult in gamification studies these days. So the kind of marketing hype here. But the problem with gamification, as far as dialogue and as far as instrumental uses go is that the mechanics tend to be very much applied externally to an activity, and therefore there are metaphors like the chocolate covered broccoli, meaning that you have the nice chocolate there and then the healthy thing, and you're trying to combine this mix with everything else. And that means that the activity itself might not remain as interesting as it's supposed to be made by these game elements. So this as a quick background, and just as a reminder on instrumental operational gaming, we have the two extremes here. The first one, this is a slightly old screenshot from a business simulation. This is Timo Lainema's real game, a very popular Finnish game. Looks like you're playing with Excel, basically, but apparently, according to interviews from players, this is both useful and extremely addictive. So when you are teaching business students to play something like this, they would like to continue from home, still playing, and so forth. Of course, this is such a complex game environment that a point I will return to soon. It is very difficult to reflect on your decisions in a game like this because the activity itself is so all-encompassing. So you are learning skills or you are putting already learned skills into use, but there is not that much room for actually pondering your decisions and for the kind of double loop learning a lot of game-based learning literature and organizational play literature is emphasizing. So you have something that works really well, but the takeaways from it are not necessarily guaranteed. In the case of this game, the designers use, for instance, reflective essays and debriefings afterwards to make sure the right things are learned. I will happily answer questions more on that. This is the other end. So a live action role play used for the purposes of organizational learning has the advantages of free speech, has some very useful playful alibi, a point I will return to soon, for taking things home. It allows a lot of dialogue and the creation of information through play and so forth. But the challenge usually with this kind of approach is that it is not exactly.
Okei. Hei, laita mulle valokuva. Kun mä oon tossa.
Can we get another mute? Thank you. Yes. So what is lacking is structure. So you have the playful alibi, you have people engaging in things, you can even guide the topic in a role play by giving people scripted motives for the play, giving them characters behind whom you can sort of hide, I would say, for the purposes of raising points and so forth. But the challenge is that the activities are not necessarily that structured. So you can guide them to a certain direction, but it is not guaranteed that you get what you want. And this brings us to Topaasia, which is what connects us maybe today here the most. An example of something I would call a design game because of its properties, but it could just as well be just treated as kind of serious or instrumental gaming. We don't need the definitions really that much, but as said, design games have a few traits of their own. I'm not gonna go explaining the mechanics. I expect you to sort of know how the game actually functions. But what we have here is a kind of very clearly structured turn taking. We have clear goals of trying to negotiate certain points, and we have tools for guiding people towards participation. What we do lack is for instance, clear motives for people to participate. So unlike in some of the other games where you have the threat of failure, for instance, if we think about running a virtual business, if you don't engage with it, it's gonna run down and then everyone sees it hasn't happened. Here, we don't have something that would force people to really participate in the dialogue. We can motivate them strongly through play. We can emphasize that they should participate in it by way of simply selecting, for instance, the right groups and so forth. And this way, we have access to certain probabilities. Today, I'm going to be talking about this kind of play and useful dialogue play more generally based on research I've been doing with especially a designer called Rosa Melkko, and we've been looking at recorded sessions of Topaasia play a few years ago, and we noticed certain key trends that I'm happy to share here, partially in the speech and partially maybe in answers to your questions. But one of the key findings and takeaways was that the initial selection, who actually comes to play, may be the most important thing in the whole process, even though a game like Topaasia can be really efficient in bringing results. But I would argue also, for the sake of a small provocation, that you are sort of playing with somewhat loaded dice towards certain responses if you are selecting beforehand who plays and who plays with who and so forth. So always keep in mind that also the context of a tool's use can affect the findings that you make from it, or the propositions for, in this case, organizational development and so forth. So I talk about Topaasia being a design game, and something that has been found to be particular to what we call design games is this threefold purpose or nature of the gaming. This is where they differ from a lot of other instrumental gaming forms. So Kirsikka Vaajakallio, who is now a leading designer at the design agency Hellon and has been there for a long time, one of Finland's most prominent service designers and brilliant scholar, proposed that in design games we have three things at the same time. They are simultaneously tools, mindsets, and structures. And this trinity is important for understanding why, for instance, Topaasia works as well as it does. So first of all, we have the game as a kind of tool, and this means not only that it is an artifact, a digital or a physical artifact, which we use for the purposes of information or knowledge creation, but it is a tool also in the sense that we can compare it with, for instance, other organizational dialogue or development tools. So in that sense, it is connected not only to gaming, but also connected to other things we might use, for instance, during meetings to develop more knowledge and so forth. So there's the tool aspect that is not special to games, but can be emphasized by the game being a game. Secondly, there's a mindset. So when you are engaging in gameplay, your brain is functioning in other ways than outside of the play. Michael Apter, a psychologist, speaks of a paratelic mindset, which is facilitated by games and playful activities. It means that challenges are seen more as interesting things as opposed to threats. Apter's basic example is sailing. If you are on a sailboat alone and you're facing a strong wind, your mind is enjoying the challenge. If the wind becomes too harsh, you suddenly become afraid for your life, and then it's no longer fun. And our mind is able to keep between these two things very smoothly. And in organizational gameplay, we need the playful mindset to be able to, for instance, talk about challenging topics, but also to envision new futures and so forth. We kind of need the ability to play with ideas, and games, especially design games, they can foster this kind of a process. Then the third function is the structure. These kinds of games structure the dialogue. They open the points for talking about these things, and they assist in things like turn taking and so forth, so that we are able to give more room for also the more silent people in a discussion. If you're in a free form situation like the live action play I showed you, or a meeting where you don't have to ask for your turn to speak, then it's easy that certain voices come to dominate the discussions too much. Here we have the ability to control it with structure to some extent. And before I continue, I want to answer what was in the chat. So the playful mind is closely connected to Csikszentmihalyi's idea of flow, of having this kind of process where you are enjoying the activity and losing your sense of self for that activity and so forth. So these theories are easily complementary with each other and can support each other. And flow theory is actually our friend for understanding the advantages of these games, because if a challenge level in the discussion or in the process in general is optimal, then you have neither boredom or over stress from the activity, so it's not too difficult and it's not too easy. And good games and good, especially gamification also, even though I am critical of it, can really foster flow experiences in organizational settings. And while the turn taking of for instance Topaasia might seem to be breaking this kind of optimal experience, in fact, if the discussion is good, you lose yourself in a way to the talk, and you enjoy continuing it. So that is actually a fitting theory for understanding this as well. A lot of the literature points out, they talk about organizational knowledge creation and of knowledge as some kind of a stock which you can store and transfer and give to other people and so forth. But when we come to these kinds of games, if we think about Topaasia play, for instance, or what is happening around the serious use of Legos for learning purposes or dialogue creation, then we might actually need to talk more about information creation. So the slight difference, it's not in one cognitive structure and can be transferred to another one, but rather we have information which is created usually in this kind of play based on information that exists in the individuals participating in the thing, probably also in the organization's own information production. But it is kind of alien, and people need to appropriate or adapt it to fit their own knowledge structures. So this means that we can't use really these kinds of games unless we are wanting to teach something very specific, like a skill with the business simulation I showed. We are able to put information on the table, and then we can't guarantee what kind of use people make of it. And this way the information approach is slightly more appropriate. So think of it as invisible elements that exist on the table, and people either bring them with themselves in a slightly altered form, or the ideas are left at the dialogue table. It's quite easy if you don't have something like the summaries a Topaasia session includes at the end, to take really stuff with you from there, and we can't guarantee the learnings of other people at the table. So now a few theoretical aspects. I'm going to use the systems intelligence inventory to explain some of the points here, and I see that time is running very quickly. So first of all, we have the kind of discursive limits that are usual for organizations. Games can break this. So we a lot of times have limits based on hierarchies and based on power structures. Who gets to say what? Who has a turn? If you think about a game of Topaasia, if it's facilitated efficiently, then you have people who will likely be able to talk with each other and dropping rank to some extent. Also because you are not gaining more points than your boss, as would be in another game. Here you are maybe disagreeing with the boss, and unless there are problems, you can get away with a lot. Okay, and here we have then the existing limitations which the game can break to some extent. Then we have engagement with the play, including the potential of a flow experience, and reflection, which usually can't take place while you are playing. Design games are an exception to this to a large extent. They are about playing with the reflective side of activities. So even if you are in a completely immersed state while playing, you will probably be still able to think about what is happening at the table, simply because that's the purpose of these kinds of games. That's why they are so elegant as organizational tools. You don't need to do reflective essays afterwards. You can reflect on the information that is at play, and you can create your own knowledge from what is there. This is from Hannula's dissertation, a picture explaining how the dialogical construction of knowledge happens while we are playing a game like this. So as you can see, there are these instances of talk here in the form of explicated knowledge, and it encounters the background knowledge of the other person whose views are changed, and this kind of dialogical knowledge creation is built based on these steps. And you can envision here the turns of the card plays, and the ways then in which each discursive element, each utterance, we could say, is a kind of moment when there is a proposition for knowledge creation out of the given information being made. And that's the whole point. You can play, as Jussi's newest design shows, also for the purpose of self-reflection. But when we are playing a game like Topaasia or other similar games like Atlas, then the point is in this kind of shared construction processes. I already mentioned playful alibi. So the fact that we consider the game a game or a session of play, it gives us what Sebastian Deterding, one of world's leading gamification experts, has called the playful alibi here. So the game at its best focuses us on the discussion that is taking place. Now we are seeking the biggest strength in our organization, and it gives you an alibi. So the card made me say it. I had to say this difficult thing, and we need to take it into consideration. But hey, it's because it's in the game rules. The game can hide who suggests what. Service designers use capital letters and post-it notes that have the same color for the same purpose of obfuscating who from the front desk or being the leading boss who is also participating in play. We don't know who said what. So it gives more room for expressing certain views and so forth. Sometimes these kinds of structures aren't enough if the organization in question is very jaded, or if people are not taking the gameplay seriously or well, seriously enough, then you sometimes need to break their form. The recent culture of winning deck available for Topaasia, at least in Finnish, is a good example of this, with its outrageous propositions for things where everyone knows that we can't take this really seriously, or it would be extremely offensive. So the kind of combination of shock and awe in this sense can function as also producing dialogue. And then these games, same as with any simulations, gives the safety to fail safely. I'm using the safe twice, following a Japanese scholar, Professor Chukia, to explain kind of, you need to feel safe and you know that you can fail safely. The whole point of a flight simulator for training is that you can crash it without getting damage or millions in things you need to pay. So the game allows you also, in the case of Topaasia, to throw in propositions, and you know that it's not going to necessarily lead to any results. Your card might not win, but the whole point that there is the safety to fail is so important. In these games, when they are not functioning so well, we might have what I call silent gatekeepers. So people who are watching over what others are saying, and Rosa and I, we discovered that in most tables we actually had people. So someone who controls with their mere presence and some gestures or facial expressions what can be said. So we kind of need to also reduce the effect of the gatekeepers. They can also provide really positive things in the table, but they can also break the playful alibi. Now, Rosa and I, we've been studying the gameplay of Topaasia from the perspective of the systems intelligence inventory, which is a group of 8 factors at play. I will explain a few of these, not going to go to the entire list. Examples we've observed elsewhere. I've been studying game development, so these contain things like aware of what is happening in the business environment, active sharing, understanding your silent presence as a positive force, interest in other people's recommendations, the will to make decisions in the case of design games, will to take the ideas that we gain from play and bring them to action, and so forth. So a kind of list of positive elements. And I'm going to emphasize a few here in the time that I have left. One of these things that together lead to positive results in both workplace well-being and into more productive results. First one I want to emphasize is positive attitude. The fact that we play a game for the great majority of people brings a positive attitude. We like play. It's inherent in our nature, and we when we have structured play, we react positively to the expectations of play. About 1% of the population doesn't like games either because they dislike losing. They are too competitive, which can even arise in a game like Topaasia. And partially because some just don't find the function for it. But in general, over 90% of people do enjoy gameplay, and we can use this instrumentally to our advantage. Then secondly, we have the factor of attunement, so your silent presence and empathy towards the other people at the table. And if we can guide it the right way, it becomes a sense of support, maybe a tiny nod towards someone who is playing a card or something like that. Or it can be gatekeeping where with a glance we make sure that the person who is playing cards we don't like doesn't feel good about playing them. So making sure there is this kind of positive spirit underlining the play activity can really mean the difference between these two forms. And getting the supportive attunement can work wonders for organizational development goals and the formation of dialogue. Then we have spirited discovery, being enthusiastic about finding out new things in play. And this is what happens in a good session of a design game. So and the way in which we can bring things into activity. But the spirited discovery alone is rarely sufficient. We need wise action. We need effective responsiveness. We need the kind of positive engagement with the findings or the information produced by the gameplay and the willingness to take them further so that the discoveries become real things. Nothing kills interest in organizational play as well as the fact that it's played and then the ideas are never taken further. This is where the problems of the discursive limits created by the organization structures can play havoc, and therefore we need the kind of organizational legitimacy for this kind of play in order to get the good results. So if players of a design game know that no actions will be taken as a result of the game, for instance, that the last time they proposed something, it did not go through, then the motivation to do any of the previously mentioned positive things will probably be absent from the game. And let's face it, no matter how enjoyable a game of Topaasia, for instance, can be, people are not going to be playing it mostly for fun, excluding very certain decks like the culture of winning that I mentioned. So you need to have this kind of external, not justification, but certainty that the gameplay can and will maybe make a difference. And when the gameplay is done well, it doesn't only allow for meaning making and sense making in the sense of producing enough information for understanding the organizational situation, but it should also give you tools to explain things to others and to really engage in the co-construction of the information and therefore the potential knowledge that is present as well. So you want the play to create enough something so that it feels meaningful, and also that it would motivate people to participate in information sharing and the creation of things more from there. And something that is a really nice advantage of this kind of play is that it breaks or disrupts organizational genres. When we are talking about things within organizational settings, we tend to work in genres. This is an idea from organization scholar Eero Vaara and Andrea Whittle, who have talked about how organizational speech becomes kind of fixated and jaded and follows certain conventions. The talk between an assistant and a boss follows usually a certain format. Your meeting with an agenda follows a kind of genre of discussion and so forth. A session of a game like Topaasia is something that's disruptive, both because you have people from various walks of organizational life in there, and also because the gameplay creates a kind of structure that does not fit any of the expected genres. So you can make miracles with this kind of play if you have the right stakeholders at the table and they really engage in the play following the rules that you have there. Gamification is the big question mark here, and this is something I would like to maybe have questions about. So when you have something where you're just adding the play to an existing activity, it can mean that it's not as playful, it doesn't feel as effective and so forth. But on the other hand, you can view something like Topaasia, because it's kind of a limit case game, as an addition to an organizational meeting, for instance. And thereby you are gamifying the activity that is in the meeting, which may have its own agenda, and then it would have a set of cards and a few rounds of play. And if you systematize this, you can actually reap some of the benefits of both the freeform play and the game element containing meeting and so forth. So not just trying to gamify through simple gamistic elements, but rather introducing the game to the activity in connection with it. At first, if people play during meetings and then discuss the formal stuff or vice versa, it might seem weird. But if you have like 3 or 4 times this kind of thing where the play becomes a systematic part of the information or even knowledge creation at some step there, people will probably start enjoying it and assign meaning and the kind of sense giving to it, where you are guiding others towards more useful decisions and the creation of more applicable information and so forth. So when we play with these, the question is, are we creating knowledge or information or both? I think that in most cases where we claim there's knowledge creation, there's actually just information creation, but the possibility of also producing information, as in the Hannula figure I showed you, is possible. Fruitful dialogue can and will arise with from these kinds of games if you deploy them with skill and a bit of forethought as well. If it works fine, we get dialogue. If it doesn't work that fine, then we just get a series of structured monologues and have the game session be done so that the speech utterances that happen get responses, provoke new ideas, and really lead to the dialogue in this. You can facilitate the game even without intruding on the play too much, and make sure that people are more likely to really be in dialogues. Not everyone is capable of it, but many times, many people in organizational settings are. And then conflict, if done well in the game, for instance, in discussing which topic is the most important for this session, then you can have productive conflict. And in general, in organizational learning, positive conflicts can be a really good force of creating dialogue. If everyone just nods and agrees, you don't have more than a monologue there. If you need to debate the decisions of even just which card do we choose, you are creating an artificial conflict, and those are at the heart of most games, and you are creating the artificial conflict as a positive force for your organization. So see it in that light and facilitate the gameplay towards that, and you are more likely to get results than with just people agreeing a lot. Very quickly on this systematic systems and intelligence thing I mentioned previously, if you're interested, there is a great literature review just out by Evelina Toivonen and Satu Jumisko-Pyykko, where you can find a lot more about the factors that I mentioned and their organizational uses. If you found what I presented here as interesting, you can check out my and Rosa's article about using Topaasia in a major financial organization where we followed sessions by the same teams and so forth. And a lot of what I've been saying here today is based on this research work. So those two research reading tips. And now I am open to your questions. Thank you.